My name is Marian Holloway. And before we begin, I want to say something clearly. I never expected to fight another war at 74, but betrayal has a way of calling old soldiers back into battle. This time, I wasn't defending a nation. I was defending something far more personal. My name, my honor, and the men and women I served with. So before you sit down and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth, because you might actually regret missing out on this dramatic story. Let me take you back. I served 32 years in the U.S. Army. I was never the loudest voice in the room, but I knew how to hold my ground. Logistics personnel and, toward the end, veteran transition programs. After retirement, I traded my uniform for a cardigan and dedicated my time to helping fellow veterans land on their feet. In my neighborhood, I was Colonel Marian, the woman who could get your benefits. Paperwork pushed through faster than the VA could lose it. People trusted me, not because I demanded it, but because I showed up, listened, and kept my word. My son Curtis grew up in the shadow of that reputation. I'd like to say he admired it. For a long time, I even believed that. He was always charming, good at talking, great at smiling, and quick to offer a helping hand when people were watching. He didn't join the military, which was fine by me. I never wanted my path to become his burden. Instead, he majored in business and marketing, said he wanted to make an impact in his own way. At first, I thought he was doing just that. 3 years ago, Curtis invited me to a dinner. Something big, he said. Something that honors you. I should have felt flattered. But even then, something sat wrong in my stomach. The restaurant was upscale, the kind of place veterans like me usually avoid because of the silent pressure to pretend you belong. Curtis wore a tailored navy suit, slicked back hair, and a $400 smile. He looked like a senator. "Mom," he said, standing to toast with a glass of wine. He didn't offer me first. "I'm launching a nonprofit. A fund for struggling veterans named in your honor." I blinked. What? "The Marian Holloway Veterans Trust," he said, beaming. "It's time your legacy helped even more people. You've done so much. Now we go national." The word sounded good, noble even. But the speed of it, the Polish, the way he made it about me, I knew the tools of persuasion too well to be seduced by them. Still, I nodded. I didn't want to dim his enthusiasm. A month later, my name and face appeared on a website, mvhtrust.org. A quote in gold lettering read, "No one is left behind, especially not our veterans. Marian Holloway." I never said that. But there it was beneath a donation button. At first, the donations poured in. Friends from my old platoon called to say how proud they were. I received letters from strangers thanking me for starting the movement. It should have felt gratifying. Instead, it felt off. Curtis posted glossy photos with celebrity veterans, hosted black tie galas, and shook hands with congressmen. And all the while, I kept asking the same question: where's the help? One morning, I got a knock at my door. It was Alan Greeley, a veteran I'd served with in Iraq. He was once a tall, unbreakable man. That day, he looked weathered, shrunken by years and disappointment. "I applied for help through the trust," he said. "Didn't hear back. Lost my place last week. Just thought, maybe you could help? Since it's your organization." My throat went dry. "I don't run it, Alan," I said gently. "Curtis does, but I'll make some calls." He gave me a weak smile. "Tell your son," I said, thanks for the silence. That night, I sat on my porch staring out into the dark, my hands trembling with something I hadn't felt since combat. The ache of betrayal creeping into the bones. This wasn't just a miscommunication. It was the first crack in something Curtis had built with too much shine and too little soul. And something told me it wouldn't be the last. After Alan's visit, I tried to convince myself it was an isolated case. Maybe an application got lost or an email slipped through the cracks. Mistakes happen. Even in the Army, bureaucracy has a way of misfiling what matters most. But then came the second call. Bobby Rhodes, Marine, double amputee. I'd helped him navigate the VA system after his discharge years ago. He was stubborn, tough in the way Marines tend to be, but I knew him as a proud, honest man. "Marian," he said, his voice cracking like old wood, "I don't want to bother you, but I donated $5,000 to your trust. I thought it'd go toward housing some of the guys at the shelter. but nobody's seen a dime. I sat down slowly at my dining table, phone pressed to my ear. You donated. To the trust. Yeah, because I trust you. The word punched me in the gut. I hung up after promising to look into it, then opened my laptop. I hadn't paid much attention to the trust's website since Curtis launched it. Now I studied every pixel with the eyes of a veteran and a mother. The site looked flawless. Slick. Professional. Big pictures of Curtis shaking hands with veterans. My face in the corner smiling like a proud endorser. But what I didn't see was just as important. No list of funded programs. No statistics. No mention of partnerships with shelters, clinics, or employment centers. Just a donation button. Everywhere. Even on the mobile version, the call to donate popped up within seconds. Not volunteer. Not apply for help. Just give and give and give. I called Curtis the next morning. He didn't answer. So I drove to his office in the city, a trendy co-working space in a renovated warehouse with concrete floors and cold brew on tap. The receptionist, a girl no older than 19 with bubblegum pink hair, gave me a bright smile. Hi, can I help you? I'm here to see Curtis Holloway. Oh, he's in a meeting. But if you're press, we can schedule something. I'm not press, I said. I'm his mother. Her smile faltered. Let me check. 10 minutes later, Curtis appeared in the hallway, polished and perfect, with a Bluetooth headset still in one ear. He greeted me with a kiss on the cheek, and the kind of grin you reserve for an audience. Mom, what a surprise. Can we talk? He hesitated. 5 minutes. I'm stacked today. We sat in a glass-walled office with modern chairs and a view of the city skyline. He leaned back like a CEO, fingers steepled, performing success. I've been getting calls, I said. From donors. From veterans. Great, he said. That's traction. No, not great, Curtis. They're not getting help. They think I'm the one ignoring them. He smiled again, cool, dismissive. Mom, this is how nonprofit branding works. You attach a name people trust. Yours has weight. It's marketing. And it's working. I stared at him. Are you saying you're using my name without running the actual programs? He shrugged. I'm building a foundation. You think Facebook started by saving the world? That's not the same. These are veterans. You're taking their money. Their hopes. Don't be so dramatic, he said. We're laying the groundwork. Once we scale, the programs will come. And in the meantime, he leaned in, voice low. In the meantime, donors feel good. We get press. We grow. That's how you change the world now, through perception. I stood up. My body felt cold even in the heat of the sunlit office. Curtis, this is fraud. He smiled wider. Only if someone says it is. I walked out without another word. My legs moved, but my chest felt hollow. I'd faced down armed insurgents in sandstorms, led teams through war zones, and fought bureaucrats for every medical benefit my soldiers deserved. But nothing prepared me for that moment. Because I realized then, my son wasn't just misguided. He was proud of it. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in my den, photos of my platoon mates around me, medals tucked in drawers I rarely opened, and stared into the dark. Curtis had taken the one thing I never thought anyone could tarnish, my name. And he was selling it, polished, packaged, and weaponized. But he'd forgotten something. He may have inherited my smile, but not my silence. 2 weeks after that conversation, I started receiving letters. They came folded neatly in standard white envelopes. No return address, just my name, written by hand in ink that trembled slightly. Inside each one was a story. A veteran who'd emptied her savings account to honor Marian Holloway. A widow who'd sent in $200 monthly believing it would help another mother bury her son. A father in Nebraska who wrote, "My son didn't make it back. I gave to your trust because I thought it would help another boy make it home." Every line cut deeper than the last. Curtis had weaponized my legacy, not just to enrich himself, but to harvest goodwill and sacrifice from the very people who had nothing left to give. They believed in the trust because they believed in me. And I had let that happen. I felt it then, not just anger, not just betrayal, but shame. Shame so sharp it silenced me for days. Because for all the medals and honors I had earned, I had failed in the most personal mission of all. Protecting the people who trusted me most. I tried to call Curtis again, straight to voicemail. His outgoing message still said, "Thank you for supporting the Marian Holloway Veterans Trust. Together we serve those who served." I hung up before the beep. That week, I attended a community veterans event at the Civic Center. I needed to see them, my people. The ones who wore their pain in their joints, their medals in their hearts, and their dignity like armor that never fully came off. I wore my old service pin, the one Curtis used on the Trust website. Maybe I hoped it would remind me who I was outside of motherhood. It didn't take long before I heard murmurs. "Have you seen what happened to Larry? Curtis Holloway said the funds were delayed again. They say Marian's trust is raising millions." I walked to the coffee table, poured myself a black cup, and sat quietly. That's when I saw him, Donnie Kessler. We had shared a barracks once, decades ago. He was one of the loudest, funniest soldiers I'd ever met. Now he walked with a cane and eyes that flicked to the floor too quickly. He didn't recognize me at first. "Donnie," I said gently. He looked up. "Marian." We hugged like comrades, brief, tight, no words. "I heard you gave to the trust," I said after a while, keeping my tone neutral. His smile faded. "I gave everything, Marian. Sold my watch, the house, moved into my daughter's basement. I thought, if it was your trust, it had to be real." I felt my throat close. "You haven't heard back?" "Not a word," he said. "Called the number. Left messages. I even emailed that contact you had listed, some assistant named Jaina, I think. I didn't know a Jaina. You know what's funny?" he added. "Curtis showed up to our American Legion Hall 2 months ago. Said the trust was expanding. He promised jobs for disabled vets. Even gave a speech." He chuckled bitterly. We clapped. I cried. That night, I didn't go home. I drove around in circles with the radio off, the window cracked, and my heart raw. The city passed in blur, streetlights, and silence. Curtis had made the rounds. Visited shelters, posed for photos, took checks, left veterans in worse condition than before. Because false hope is crueler than no hope at all. I returned home around 2:00 a.m. And when I stepped into my living room, I saw the stack of letters again, now joined by one more envelope on the table. It had no name. Only a sentence written on the outside. "You don't know the half of it." Inside was a photocopy of a spreadsheet. Column after column of donor names, amounts, emails, notes like repeat giver, possible media contact, and military family easy pitch. At the top, MHT master file. Internal only. MHT, Marian Holloway Trust. I felt my hands tremble for the first time in years. Curtis hadn't just taken my name. He'd built a system to mine pain, to catalog grief, to monetize trust. And someone out there wanted me to know it. That was the moment something inside me shifted. Not as a mother, not even as a veteran, but as a soldier. Because betrayal cuts deep, but it also clears the fog. And now I had a mission. The next morning, I sat down at the kitchen table with the spreadsheet spread before me like a battlefield map. Rows of names, cold numbers. Notes scribbled in the margins like easy, close, and wife, recently widowed. It wasn't just manipulation. It was predation. Curtis had learned how to speak veteran. He knew how to mirror their pain, nod at the right words, touch his chest when he said, "sacrifice." And now I could see just how many had believed him. I began making calls, not as a mother, not as a former lieutenant colonel, as Marian Holloway, the woman whose name had been used to steal dignity from the broken and the brave. The first number belonged to a woman named Elaine Potter, Vietnam widow. Her husband had died of lung cancer from Agent Orange exposure. Her son served in Desert Storm. He came home but not whole. Elaine donated $200 to the trust. She answered on the second ring. "Mrs. Potter," I said, "my name is Marian Holloway. You donated to a veterans charity with my name on it." She was quiet for a long time. I could hear a clock ticking in the background. "I thought I did," she said softly. "I'm calling to tell you. You didn't." There was a pause. Then a shaky breath. "I knew it," she whispered. "I knew it in my bones, but I didn't want it to be true." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. "But you're not alone. And I won't let this go." She didn't cry. That was the thing. Most of the people I spoke with didn't. It was worse than tears. It was the silence of people who had already lost too much to lose their outrage too. There were dozens of them. Some had given $50, some their retirement checks. Many were elderly living on fixed incomes. They gave because of the name, because they remembered me, because someone said Marian Holloway is behind this. I kept records, built a database of my own, cross-referenced every name with the spreadsheet from the anonymous envelope. The overlap was devastating, and every time I hung up, my hands shook, because these weren't just donors. These were my people, my unit, my brothers and sisters in arms. We wore different uniforms, fought different wars, but the code was the same. You do not leave your own behind. But Curtis had, and he hadn't looked back. I wanted to scream, to call a press conference, to march up to his office and throw the spreadsheet in his smug face. But emotion wouldn't win this war. I needed proof, undeniable, airtight public. So I turned to the one place where broken hearts gather quietly, the VFW. On Tuesday evenings, our local post held story nights. Informal, no microphones, just veterans and families sharing memories over bad coffee and old donuts. It was the kind of space where war didn't need to be explained, just felt. That night, I asked to speak. They gave me the floor. I know some of you have given to the Marian Holloway Veterans Trust. I began, my voice steady. And I need to tell you the truth. I didn't start it. I don't run it. And I never saw a penny of it go to anyone here. The room went still. I know many of you gave because of me, because of my name, and I have to ask. Have any of you received support from this trust? Not a single hand went up, but what happened next was unforgettable. One by one, they began to speak. James, who donated $500 and received nothing. Linda, who asked for wheelchair access funding and was told to wait for the next quarter. Carlos, who never got a reply at all. Then came Hank. He stood up slowly, cane trembling in one hand, a faded Marine cap in the other. I lost my wife last year, he said. Gave the funeral donation to the trust. Thought I'd be doing something good, something she'd be proud of. He stared straight ahead, not at me, not at anyone. But now, I feel like I lost her again. I couldn't hold it together after that. I stepped outside. The autumn air hit me like a slap. Cold. Final. I looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, the flag still flew. The same one Curtis used on his brochures. The same one folded in the shadow box that hung above my desk. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to call him. I wasn't going to ask questions. I was going to find everything. Because the damage was deeper than dollars. It was trust crushed beneath ego and greed. And the only way to restore it was to tear his illusion down in front of the world. There's something about betrayal that rewires your instincts. For years, I'd trusted my gut as a soldier, a mother, a counselor to veterans lost in the red tape of systems too big to care. But now every instinct screamed, follow the money. And so I did. Curtis never expected I'd look past the polished exterior. He'd counted on my silence, on my shame. But I hadn't survived war and bureaucracy to be dismantled by my own blood. I began with the fake website. Most people don't know that charity websites, especially ones running high-traffic donations, leave digital footprints. And I knew just enough to be dangerous. I contacted a friend of mine, Thomas Reese. He was a retired cyber operations officer who now tinkered with servers and encryption for fun. Curtis used your name, he asked after I explained. That's low even for corporate grifters. I need to know where the money's going. Who's receiving it? And fast. Thomas nodded. Send me the website and I'll poke around. Might take a few days. Meanwhile, I returned to the spreadsheet. One donor note caught my eye. N. Petrovsky, widow TV reporter. Contact close VM. H. I remembered her, Nina Petrowski. She'd interviewed me years ago for a local segment on women in service. Smart, poised, and fiercely protective of veteran causes. I called her, unsure what I'd say. She picked up on the first ring. Marian. It's been too long and not long enough for what I'm calling about. I explained everything briefly, clearly, without emotion. There wasn't room for sentiment in a story like this. By the end, Nina was silent. Then, you want to go public? Not yet. Not without evidence. But if I send you documents, can you help me verify them? Background names, donation patterns, public filings. I'll do better, she said. I'll help you build a case. That evening, Thomas called back. I got in, he said. Sort of. What do you mean? The donation page is real and it is linked to a payment processor, but not to a 501c3. It's going to a shell account. Private. Under the name Holloway Strategic Solutions. My breath caught. Holloway Strategic Solutions was a business Curtis had launched 2 years ago. I thought it failed. I thought it was dead. Apparently, it had just found a more lucrative host. Thomas continued. There's a redirect loop that cleans the trail after each transaction. It's deliberate. This isn't sloppiness. It's laundering. The word hit like a punch to the sternum. Money that veterans gave in faith was being funneled through fake names into an entity run entirely by my son. Worse, the shell company filed reports showing consulting disbursements to people who didn't exist. I forwarded everything to Nina. She responded with 2 words. It's real. Then she added, Marian, we may have enough to file a fraud report. But if you want this to make a real impact, you need to expose him publicly. Not just legally. I wasn't ready for that. Not yet. So I took the next step. I requested the trust's registration documents. Under IRS regulations, public nonprofits must disclose certain records. Curtis had never filed one under that name, but he had filed another, the Holloway Impact Fund, listed under Charity for Underserved Military Families, registered in Delaware, operated out of Get This a P.O. box in New Mexico. No board, no staff, just one name, Curtis L. Holloway. It was a front, all of it. What sickened me most was the donation letter he sent to donors. I'd finally seen a scanned copy. It included a typed signature from me, my name forged. A message of gratitude that I never wrote. On behalf of our brave brothers and sisters in arms, thank you. Your gift will change a life. Elte Kulli Marian Holloway Rhett. My hand shook holding it. I'd spent a lifetime building that name, wearing it with pride on uniforms, name tags, official documents, community centers. Curtis had turned it into a mask, and I wasn't going to let him wear it anymore. I scanned the documents, flagged the accounts, printed out the letters, and began building what would become my black folder, the one that would one day bring the entire illusion down. Still, something was missing, a way to truly break the dam. Then one night my doorbell rang. It was past 9 p.m. I looked through the peephole and saw a young woman, early 30s, hoodie pulled up, eyes red. Mrs. Holloway, she asked. I nodded. My name is Jaina. I was Curtis's assistant. I have something you need to see. I opened the door wide. Come in, because this was it. The moment the silence finally cracked, Jaina stood just inside my front door, soaked in a silence far heavier than the night rain behind her. Her hoodie dripped at the shoulders, her hands trembling as she clutched a worn canvas messenger bag like a shield. I don't know where else to go, she said. Start with the truth, I replied, motioning her to sit. We settled in the living room. I offered her a blanket, a cup of hot tea. Small things, but they matter when someone's world has begun to break. I was Curtis's executive assistant for almost 2 years, she began. At first, I thought I was joining something meaningful. The pitch was amazing support for veterans, a strong woman's legacy, and national reach. She looked down, but it didn't take long to see it was a front. The money didn't match the operations. We were pulling in 6 figures monthly and doing nothing with it. No outreach, no programs, just media speeches and Curtis's consulting fees. She opened her bag and began pulling out items, bank statements, internal memos, screenshots of Slack conversations with Curtis and his marketing team, where they discussed how to milk maximum emotional ROI from trauma storytelling. I saved all of it, she said, because I didn't trust him. And because he scared me. My stomach tightened. Did he ever threaten you? Not directly, she said, but he made it clear. If I ever went public, he'd ruin me. Said no one would believe a dropout assistant over a decorated veteran's son. I exhaled slowly. She was brave, and she was about to become the key to everything. Why now? I asked. She hesitated. Because last week? He laughed. I brought up one of the emails from a veteran who couldn't get his wheelchair ramp funding. Curtis rolled his eyes and said, if they can type, they're not that disabled. Then he winked. Like it was all a game. My heart cracked. Slowly, quietly. That's when I knew, she said. I couldn't protect him anymore. She handed me a flash drive. Everything's on here. The shell companies. The media contacts he paid to run fluff pieces. Even the plan for the gala. The gala. She nodded. It's in 3 weeks. National broadcast. Veteran of the Year. Guess who's being honored? Of course. Curtis. I sat back, gripping the flash drive like a trigger. They'll be watching, she said. Politicians. Press. Donors. Military brass. If you want the world to hear you, that's the stage. The irony nearly knocked the air from my lungs. Curtis was planning to stand beneath a flag and deliver a speech about service sacrifice and family values built on the bones of people he broke. Not anymore. Not if I had anything to say about it. Jaina stayed for hours, walking me through the documents and timelines. She'd even recorded a phone call, Curtis laughing while saying, "My mother was too busy saving veterans to notice I turned them into customers." He said it like a joke. I listened to the audio 3 times. Not because I needed to verify it, but because I couldn't believe that this voice came from the boy I raised. The boy who used to make care packages for my deployed friends. The one who once cried watching me pin a medal on a fellow soldier's chest. What happened to him? I'll never know. And maybe that's what hurts most. Not the betrayal, but the loss of the version of him I thought was real. I thanked Jaina, promised her protection, and added her folder to the growing pile in my black dossier. Later that night, I called Nina. "We go public," I said, "at the gala." She didn't hesitate. "I'll be there with a camera crew," she said. "You won't be alone." That phrase hit hard, because I hadn't felt that in a long time, not since this started. Not since the first whisper of betrayal. But now the silence was turning. And Curtis, he didn't hear it yet. The rustle of evidence, the whispers of truth, the storm building with my name behind it. But he would, soon. For 3 weeks I lived in the quiet hum of preparation. It felt like the old days before deployment, when tension wasn't panic but purpose. Everything around me narrowed to the mission. I made lists, checked backups, rehearsed my words without looking in the mirror. Mirrors wouldn't help now. What I needed wasn't reflection, it was resolve. Curtis had no idea. He still posted on social media daily. Reels of smiling veterans, voiceovers about resilience and rebirth. Dramatic orchestral music swelling beneath hollow words. His latest video opened with my photo, faded noble, followed by him saying, "My mother taught me what service means. This trust is her legacy, and I'm just carrying the torch." The comments were filled with heart emojis, thank yous, God blesses. It made me sick. But I didn't respond. I didn't react. I moved like shadow. I had the flash drive, Jaina's files, the master spreadsheet of donors, and the recordings. Thomas secured my backups on a cloud drive under an alias. Nina coordinated her camera crew, quiet and agile. The gala would be held at the Marriott Conference Hall downtown. Red carpet. National flag displays. A roll call of the heroes of the year. Curtis would speak third, introduced by a retired general he paid to appear. Jaina got me a pass. "You're listed as a surprise guest," she said, smirking slightly. He thought it would give him clout. Fitting. The irony wasn't lost on me. Curtis had built his empire on borrowed valor. Now he'd given me a front row seat to burn it down. The night before the event, I couldn't sleep. I sat with my old service jacket in my lap. Not to wear it didn't fit anymore, but to remember. Every patch, every stain, every tear had a name behind it. A face. A weight. You don't forget those things, no matter how much time passes. I ran my fingers over the frayed edge of my rank insignia and whispered their names. For the ones who never came home. For the ones who did but shattered quietly. This was for them. At dawn I dressed simply. Dove gray slacks, soft blouse, and the only medal I'd ever hung on to. The Bronze Star. Not because of the honor, but because of what it cost to earn. Curtis would arrive in a designer suit flanked by publicists. I would walk in alone, but I wasn't afraid. I arrived at the venue early. Security gave me a courtesy nod. Jaina met me near the back entrance, handed me my badge. "You okay?" she asked. "Better than I've been in months." Inside the ballroom glowed gold and crimson. Rows of chairs, flags on each table, screens looping Curtis's highlight reel video from staged hospital visits, handshakes with politicians, slow-motion salutes. I took my seat 3 rows back. Center. The room began to fill. I spotted familiar faces, donors, veterans I'd known from past events, even a few who had unknowingly given their money to a lie. None of them recognized me. That was fine. They would. Curtis walked in 15 minutes before the start. Flashbulbs. Applause. He smiled like a movie star playing a soldier. When he saw me, his face flickered only for a second. Then he approached. "Mom, I didn't know you were coming. You invited me," he chuckled. "Well, it's good to see you. This night is going to be incredible." "It already is," I said. He blinked. Just once, then flashed his teeth and turned away. The ceremony began with a color guard and the national anthem. My hand instinctively rose in salute, sharp, steady. Curtis didn't salute. He adjusted his tie. One speaker after another praised compassion duty, restoring dignity to our heroes. Curtis was next. The MC's voice rang out. And now, the man carrying his mother's legacy forward, a son of service, a leader of light, Curtis Holloway. Applause thundered. Curtis stepped up to the podium, straightened his cufflinks, and looked out across the sea of faces. "I grew up watching my mother fight for what's right," he began. "This trust, it's not just a foundation, it's a promise that no veteran will ever be forgotten." Camera flashes, soft music swelled from the speakers. He smiled wider, and then I stood. 3 rows back, calm, precise, in my hands. The black folder. "Excuse me," I said, not loud but clear. Curtis paused. The audience looked. "I have something to say." The room shifted, like air before a storm. Curtis's eyes narrowed. "Mom, please." I stepped forward. The spotlight tilted. A murmur rippled through the room. And just like that, the silence began to break. I don't know how long the silence lasted, seconds maybe, but it felt like the pause between heartbeats. Curtis froze behind the podium, his perfect smile flickering like a candle in wind. Around the ballroom, faces turned toward me, some confused, some curious, some already suspecting. I walked steadily down the aisle, the black folder in hand. My steps were deliberate. I wasn't shaking. I was done shaking. Security glanced toward the event organizer, unsure. But no one moved. Maybe it was my age. Maybe it was my calm. Or maybe in that moment they sensed the truth before I even opened my mouth. I turned toward the audience. "My name is Marian Holloway," I said, my voice carrying without a microphone. "Some of you may know me. Some of you have donated money under the belief that I founded the Marian Holloway Veterans Trust." I held up the folder. I did not. A collective intake of breath followed, like a wave pulling back before the crash. Curtis stepped forward, forced a laugh. "She's confused," he said quickly. "My mother, she's not part of the daily operation. But she's our inspiration, our namesake. Let's just—" I cut him off. "This is a list of over 200 individuals, veterans, widows, Gold Star families who donated under false pretenses. Some gave their last savings. Some went into debt. None received the help they were promised." I handed the folder to a journalist in the front row. She opened it. Her eyebrows rose. "This is not an accusation. This is a record." Curtis's voice sharpened. "You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, turning to him. "You already did that for me." I stepped aside, gesturing toward the screen behind him. Nina's camera crew moved fast. A pre-prepared USB had already been slipped to the event tech. Seconds later, the projector screen flickered and changed. Gone were Curtis's highlight reels. Instead, a simple title appeared. "Where did the money go?" A montage began to play. Emails Curtis wrote mocking veterans. Fake invoices filed to Holloway Strategic Solutions. A voice recording of Curtis saying, "My mother was too busy saving veterans to notice I turned them into customers." Bank transfers to shell accounts. And finally, a split screen showing real veterans who'd received nothing. The room erupted, voices shouting. Questions flung like grenades. Some guests stood. Some stormed toward the exits. Others just stared, stunned. Curtis reached for the mic. "Everyone please, this is a smear campaign." But no one was listening. One older man in uniform stood and asked the question that cut deeper than anything I could have said. If this trust was about helping us, why is there no us in it? Curtis had no answer. The MC stammered something into the microphone, an apology maybe, but the damage was done. The event was collapsing in real time. I could see his world folding in on itself, all the golden threads unraveling. Curtis turned to me, eyes wild. "You planned this?" "No," I said. "You did. I just turned the lights on." Security moved toward the stage. But not for me. For him? Jaina appeared near the exit, whispering to two men in suits, investigators. The ones who had been waiting for this moment, their case built quietly over weeks. With Nina's media power and my folder of evidence, they didn't need a courtroom to begin justice. As Curtis was escorted from the stage, still sputtering denials, I stepped back toward the microphone. People were watching again. Phones recording. Eyes locked on mine. "I served 32 years in the United States Army," I said. "And I have seen war loss and rebuilding. But nothing ever prepared me for the betrayal of watching my name, my honor used to hurt those I swore to protect." A pause. "My son forgot something. That you don't need a gun to defend what's right. Sometimes all you need is the truth." Then I stepped down, and the room stood with me, not in applause, not in celebration, but in quiet human recognition of the truth, of the cost, of the woman who finally said what needed to be said. The gala never officially ended. Some guests slipped out the side doors embarrassed. Others remained stunned, standing in small circles whispering accusations and confessions. Veterans gathered in clusters, angry, betrayed, but not surprised. For many of them, this was just another chapter in a long book of abandonment. I didn't linger. I walked out through the main doors without speaking to the press, ignoring the bright camera flashes and shouted questions. Jaina stayed close behind her hoodie, back up, gaze steady. We didn't speak until we were blocks away, the sounds of the ballroom, now distant echoes in the night. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked. I stopped walking. "No," I said, "but it's a start." The next morning, the internet exploded. Curtis Holloway scam trended within hours. Nina's article dropped first, detailed, damning, time-stamped with financial records, whistleblower interviews, and over a dozen personal testimonies. News outlets picked it up. By noon, Curtis's name had been scrubbed from the trust's website. The site itself went dark by evening. By the next day, a federal fraud investigation had been opened. Curtis refused to speak to the media. His official statement was 4 sentences long and full of deflection. His legal team insisted this was a clerical miscommunication and no deliberate harm was intended. But the evidence was overwhelming. I received over 200 emails that week. Some were from donors thanking me, others from veterans apologizing for believing him. A few were from families who had kept silent about their losses, afraid they'd seem foolish. And one from a young woman whose brother had taken his life waiting for the trust's promised housing stipend. Her message was short. "He believed in you, not your son. Thank you for giving his belief back." I printed it and placed it on my desk. No reply was possible. Some grief deserves only quiet acknowledgement. The next few months were a blur of interviews, legal briefings, and community meetings. I was called brave. I was called controversial. I was asked more than once if I regretted exposing my own son. Let me be clear. No, I don't. Curtis had every opportunity to walk a better path. He chose greed. He chose manipulation. And worst of all, he chose to wrap that greed in patriotism and my name. He made a career out of pretending to honor veterans. I spent my life actually doing it. One afternoon, I visited Donnie Kessler, the Marine who'd given his last to the trust. He was living in a temporary shelter but had just received notice that a new housing fund, legitimate this time, had accepted his application. He didn't say much, just took my hand, nodded once and whispered, "Semper Fi." I nodded back, "Semper Fi." Later that week, I attended a quiet meeting at a VFW hall. No suits, no cameras, just a group of veterans deciding what to do with the pieces Curtis had left behind. We formed something new. The Holloway Reclamation Fund. Yes, I let them keep the name. Because it's mine too. And we were going to take it back. This time the fund would be run by veterans. Transparent. Peer-reviewed. Real assistance, no PR stunts. No marble plaques or press conferences. Just rent, paid therapy, funded mobility aids, delivered. One woman, a Navy nurse, volunteered to oversee grant distribution. A retired sergeant offered to run logistics. Nina's team created a bare-bones website, no donation buttons on the homepage. Just one sentence. This time we mean it. Meanwhile, Curtis's case moved forward. Wire fraud, tax evasion, misuse of charitable assets. The charges stacked quickly. He hired a new legal team. They blamed everyone but him. The most surreal part. He tried to call me. I didn't answer. There's nothing left to say. Because sometimes justice isn't a courtroom drama. It's not a headline. It's a slow, silent rebuilding of what someone else burned. And I have work to do. There are still people out there who gave money, gave faith, gave pieces of themselves because they trusted my name. So that's where I'll start. With each one letter, one call, one apology at a time. The real war began after the headlines faded. There's a strange kind of silence that follows public scandal, especially when it involves family. The world feasts on drama, but once justice begins to move slowly, methodically, and legally, people look away. But I couldn't, because in the quiet aftermath, victims began to speak not to journalists or crowds, but to me. Curtis's betrayal had left something behind. Shame. Not his, theirs. Veterans who had never asked for help before suddenly felt foolish for believing in the trust. They weren't just angry, they were humiliated. And that broke my heart in ways Curtis never could. I remember one man, Franklin, a Vietnam-era combat medic. He met me in the back of a diner staring down at a cup of black coffee like it held some secret code. He'd donated nearly $10,000 over 3 years to the trust. It was most of what he had. I should have known, he said quietly. The website was too slick. The promises were too big. I shook my head. No, Franklin, you gave because you believed in something good. That's not a mistake. That's character. He nodded slowly but didn't look up. And it wasn't just veterans. It was spouses, children, grandchildren of those who'd served. I began receiving handwritten letters again this time, not full of accusations or confusion, but quiet stories of regret. My mother believed in the trust one letter read. She passed before she ever knew it was a fraud. But she died proud, thinking she helped someone. That still means something. I kept every letter. Curtis, meanwhile, was out on bail, living under house arrest in a downtown apartment his lawyer insisted was modest. He didn't speak publicly again, but through back channels I heard he was angry. Not at what he'd done, but at what I had done. He said I had ruined him. He was right. But I hadn't done it for revenge. I did it because the truth has weight, and my shoulders had carried it long enough. One morning, I received a message from someone unexpected. A young woman named Maya, 23 years old. Her father had served with me in Afghanistan. He had passed 3 years ago. Curtis had promised her a scholarship from the trust. She'd sent in her application, her transcripts, her story. She never got a reply. I thought I wasn't good enough. Her message said, I thought maybe my dad's name didn't matter. But now I understand it wasn't me, it was him. I wrote back immediately. Then I called the board of the new Holloway Reclamation Fund and told them about Maya. She became our first official grant recipient. We paid her tuition, and we let her choose the name of the program she came through. She called it Operation Honorback. A month later, at our first community fundraiser, Maya stood in front of 50 veterans holding a microphone with shaking hands and told them, Curtis Holloway lied to us, but his mother didn't. She stood up for what her name really meant. And I think that's what honor looks like. I don't cry easily, but I did that day, because the worst thing about betrayal isn't what it takes from you. It's what it makes you question about yourself. I had wondered if I was to blame. If my silence in those early days gave Curtis permission. If my legacy had invited corruption. But hearing Maya speak reminded me, Curtis had borrowed my name, but he never carried it. And in the months that followed, we reclaimed it one act at a time. We helped 3 disabled veterans rebuild their homes. We connected 8 others with therapists trained in PTSD recovery. We bought winter gear for 30 more. Quiet actions. No banners. No galas. But real help. And sometimes when I sit alone in my study, I still hear Curtis's voice from that recording. My mother was too busy saving veterans to notice I turned them into customers. He thought it was a joke, but I wear that sentence like a medal, because I was busy saving them. And I still am. Only now I've learned that silence is never noble when the truth is bleeding. Winter arrived early that year. The air turned sharp in the mornings, crisp enough to remind me of military drills before dawn, when we stood still, breath ghosting in formation, waiting for orders that would carry us into the unknown. But now I wasn't waiting for orders. I was the one giving them. The Holloway Reclamation Fund had grown quietly but steadily. Word of mouth moved faster than any ad campaign. Vets talked. Spouses shared links. Counselors passed along phone numbers. It wasn't glamour, it was grassroots. And for the first time since the gala, I began to feel the heaviness inside my chest shift. It wasn't gone, but it no longer defined me. And then, the subpoena arrived. Not for Curtis. For me. Delivered by courier in a plain envelope. Inside, you are requested to appear before the House Committee on Veterans Affairs to provide testimony regarding misuse of charitable identity fraud within nonprofit veteran organizations and whistleblower protection protocols. My hands didn't shake. I read the letter twice, then placed it beside my tea as if it were just another folded napkin. Because something in me had changed. The fear that once haunted my sleep had been replaced with something colder, sharper, more useful. Conviction. When I told Jaina she was nervous. They might try to twist things, she said. Frame it like you enabled him. That you didn't notice soon enough. They can try, I replied. But I'll bring the truth with me. I wore my service jacket to the hearing. Not because I needed to remind them who I was, but because Curtis had taken so much from my identity, I needed to wear something he hadn't touched. The room was polished wood and neutral tones. Cameras mounted at every angle. Faces behind nameplates with polite smiles and politically correct frowns. They called my name. I stood, took the oath, and sat before the microphone. Miss Holloway, a congressman began. Do you believe your son used your military legacy to defraud donors? Yes, I answered clearly. Did you knowingly allow him to operate under your name? No. Why didn't you speak up sooner? A longer pause. Because I was ashamed, I said. Because I raised him. Because I believed, even when my instincts told me something was wrong, that he'd do the right thing. That's not an excuse. That's the trap most victims fall into. Love clouds the alarm bells. The room quieted. I looked down briefly at the notes I hadn't needed to read once. Then I looked back up. But when I did realize what he was doing, I acted. Quietly, strategically, and when I had enough evidence, I did what I was trained to do. I stood up even though it broke me to do it. Another panelist leaned forward. In your opinion, what safeguards should be put in place to prevent similar abuses of trust within veteran organizations? I didn't hesitate. Transparency, oversight, and most importantly, never put a cause in the hands of someone who benefits more from the story than the solution. I saw pens move quickly across paper. After the session, one of the younger aides approached me in the hallway. My dad served with you, he said. He told me about the time you pulled 3 men out of a burning convoy. I nodded. I remembered it well. I just wanted to say, you've saved lives, more than once. Tell your father thank you, I said. No, he replied. I think he'd say that to you. Later that night, I received a message from Nina. The committee hearing had gone viral. Clips of my testimony were circulating online, mostly under one headline. The veteran who exposed her own son for the sake of justice. But that wasn't what I cared about. Because the next morning, I woke to another letter. Handwritten. No return address. Inside, I was one of Curtis's fake board members. I was paid to be a name on the website. I never thought it would hurt anyone. I'm sorry, and I want to help now. Please tell me how. That was when I realized. Even the ones complicit wanted redemption. And if I could turn their shame into service, then maybe the damage Curtis did wouldn't define any of us forever. By the time spring thawed the cold edges of winter, Curtis's case had made its way to the federal court docket. The charges against him were formal now. Wire fraud, charitable misrepresentation, tax evasion, and identity misuse, 15 counts in total. His legal team fought to frame him as an ambitious son overwhelmed by scale, a well-meaning operator who simply got in over his head. But the evidence said otherwise. Jaina's documents, the fake board members, the money trail, the victims, the forged signatures, my forged signature. It was no longer a matter of whether Curtis would fall, it was how far. Still, despite everything, I didn't take pleasure in it. I've known what victory feels like. In battle, in advocacy, even in quiet administrative victories, getting a veteran approved for disability after years of rejections. But this wasn't victory. It was consequence. I kept going. The Holloway Reclamation Fund had now assisted 143 veterans across 8 states. Small grants, emergency rent, PTSD counseling, job referrals, and in one case, full funeral coverage for a widow who'd lost everything in the scam. We were becoming what Curtis pretended to be. One evening, I got a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. It was Daniel McClure, a retired Army colonel, and now head of a national veteran oversight group. "I saw your hearing," he said. "I read the reports. You know, most people in your position would have gone quiet." "I didn't have that luxury," I said. "No, you didn't," he agreed. "But you also didn't have to turn your pain into policy. That's what makes you different." He invited me to speak at their national conference. I declined the stage, but offered to help design a code of ethics for nonprofit veteran organizations. A month later, that document became real. It was called the Holloway Code. 3 pages. Direct. Unflinching. Honor is not an aesthetic. It's an obligation. Meanwhile, Curtis's lawyers attempted one last defense. Character testimonials. They sent requests to family friends, past donors. And they sent one to me. I laughed when I opened it. It was a form letter. "Would you be willing to submit a statement affirming Curtis's integrity and community leadership?" There was a box to check, yes or no. I didn't check either. Instead, I wrote one sentence at the bottom. "He may be my son, but he is not my legacy." Then I mailed it back unsigned. The press began circling again. They wanted interviews, exclusives, a possible Netflix deal. I refused them all. Because what mattered wasn't the spotlight. What mattered was what came next. That's when I began planning something else. Something not about Curtis or the trust or even the fund. Something for the ones he had hurt. A reunion. I contacted every donor I could find, those who had given under false promises, those who had applied for help and were ignored. I invited them to gather at the VFW hall, where I had first exposed the truth. No cameras, no speeches, just connection. And they came, 87 of them. From as far as Oregon and Pennsylvania, some walked with canes. Some carried photos of the loved ones they gave in honor of. A few brought copies of their donation receipts, faded, tear-stained, folded into wallets. We shared stories. We broke bread. We remembered. And near the end of the evening, someone asked the question I'd been dreading. "Do you still talk to your son?" I paused. "No," I said. "I don't." Another voice from the back asked, "Do you miss him?" And that answer was harder. "I miss the version of him that I believed in," I said honestly. "But I've learned that the love we feel for someone can't excuse the harm they cause." There was silence, then soft nods, because they understood. We all do eventually. That night, a young man approached me, 25, former infantry, quiet as snowfall. He said, "I wanted to die last year, but your story made me feel like justice is still possible." I didn't hug him. I saluted. He did the same, not because of protocol, but because that's how soldiers say, "I see you. And you matter." The day of the verdict came quietly. There were no reporters outside my door this time, no camera crews jostling for a reaction, just a cloudy sky and a soft wind through the pines behind my house, like the world had already braced itself for the truth. The courthouse livestream was private, accessible only to involved parties. Nina texted me a link. I watched from my study, sitting at the same desk where I'd first opened the spreadsheet. The same spot where the war against Curtis's deception had begun. He looked different on screen. Smaller, older. The smug confidence he once wore like a tailored suit had fallen from his shoulders. He didn't wear it well anymore. The judge read each charge slowly, methodically. Curtis stood silent, flanked by attorneys. When they asked how he pleaded, he didn't look at the camera. "Guilty," he said. The word echoed more than I expected it to. He pled down, accepted a deal that spared him the maximum sentence in exchange for restitution payments and a public admission of guilt. But the punishment wasn't just prison, it was legacy. He was now the man who stole from the people his mother lived to serve. The man whose own mother stood against him not out of vengeance but duty. I turned off the screen when they led him away in cuffs. Not because I couldn't watch, but because I had seen enough. That evening, I took a walk. There's a spot near the Veterans Cemetery where a row of flags lines the walkway. Each one represents a different war. I stopped beside the one for Afghanistan and sat on the cold stone bench nearby. I thought of the men and women I served beside. I thought of the folded flags I had handed to families with shaking hands. I thought of the promises we made. No one left behind. Curtis had betrayed that promise, but I had kept it, and that mattered. The next morning, I called Maya, the young woman we helped with the scholarship. She had finished her first semester and wanted to volunteer at the fund. I want to help someone else now, she said. Because someone helped me, it was a simple sentence, but it cracked something open in me. That afternoon, I gathered a small team and began designing a new initiative. Valor Circle's peer mentorship groups, connecting veterans with young people in need of guidance, career planning, and emotional support. We funded it through micro-donations, no fancy galas, no staged press photos. Just people helping people. One donor sent in $5 with a note that read, "I don't have much, but I believe in what you're building. I believe in you." I pinned that note above my desk, because legacy isn't what you leave in your will. It's what people carry forward because of you. Months passed. One afternoon, I received a certified letter from the prison. Curtis's handwriting was on the envelope. I stared at it for a long time. I didn't open it, not because I didn't care, but because I had already answered the question he was probably asking. I had forgiven him, but forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean return. Sometimes the line between justice and love is clear, and when it isn't, you draw it anyway. That night, I stood once more at the VFW hall. This time, not as a whistleblower, not as a mother, not even as a veteran. Just as Marian Holloway, I looked around the room filled with people who had lost faith and found it again, not in systems, but in each other. I didn't come here to be applauded, I said. I came here to thank you, because it wasn't me who brought justice. It was all of us telling the truth, holding the line and refusing to be silent. I paused. My son thought the world was built on image. He forgot the most powerful thing we carry isn't what people see. It's what we stand for when no one's looking. There was no applause, just a stillness. The kind of stillness that tells you, we hear you, and that's enough. Spring deepened, and with it came a rare, quiet bloom. Injustice had taken so much, but what remained was pure, simple, and real. The Holloway Reclamation Fund no longer felt like a response to a betrayal. It had become its own living thing, and for the first time since Curtis's deception was exposed, the mission wasn't about undoing his harm. It was about doing good. I found myself drawn more often to the small victories, the thank you emails from veterans whose heating bills were paid during cold snaps, the photo of a young woman pregnant and alone holding the new crib we'd helped fund, the voice message from a man named Otis who had spent years battling PTSD, finally laughing on the phone with his daughter again after we got him into therapy. Each story stitched something back into me, but there was still one thread left undone. Her name was Deborah Galloway. Her husband, Staff Sergeant Mark Galloway, had served with me in Fallujah. We lost him in 2007. She had been among the first donors to the trust sent a check for $2,000 in Mark's honor. She never received a thank you. No response. No acknowledgement. She hadn't spoken to anyone about it, not until a local vet center handed her our new funds pamphlet. She called our office line late one Friday. I was the one who picked up. "Is this the real one?" she asked quietly. "It is," I said. The silence on the other end stretched. "I sent that money because I thought I was helping someone like Mark," she said. But when no one answered, I felt like I'd buried him twice. I swallowed hard. "I can't take back what my son did, but I can make sure you're not forgotten again." We arranged to meet in person. I brought her flowers, yellow lilies, Mark's favorite, and a folded letter with his name handwritten on the envelope. When we met at the park near her home, she looked older than I remembered. Grief has a way of etching itself into the lines around someone's eyes. But when she opened the letter and read what I'd written about Mark, about honor, about what we were building in his name, her hands stopped shaking. "You remembered," she whispered. "Always," I said. We sat on the bench for an hour talking about her husband's laugh, his bad singing, the way he always bought two of everything just in case. The kind of stories you don't tell newspapers. Only people who knew. Before she left, she looked me in the eye and said, "You may not have known what Curtis was doing, but you sure as hell knew what to do after." That was the highest praise I'd ever received. Higher than any medal, deeper than any title. The weeks rolled forward. Curtis's sentencing loomed. I kept working, kept answering phones, kept writing letters to veterans who still didn't understand that they weren't the fools, he was the liar. One morning, I received a box in the mail. No name, no return address. Inside, a collection of returned checks never cashed. Dozens, all with the trust's old logo, and one note in slanted handwriting. I worked in the finance department. I wanted to quit. I didn't. "I'm sorry. I hope this helps you help them now." It did. We reissued those funds directly to applicants from the original donor list. Quietly, privately. No one needed to know how we'd gotten the money back. They just needed to know that someone finally cared enough to deliver it. That night, I found myself looking through an old photo album. One picture stopped me. Curtis, age 10, wearing my oversized military jacket, saluting in the mirror. His smile so big it looked like it could burst through the frame. I traced his face with one finger, not with anger, with sadness, because that boy, he had believed in me once, and I had believed in him. But somewhere between admiration and ambition, he learned to mimic what mattered instead of becoming it. And now, we both lived with that cost. I closed the album. I didn't need the past anymore. The future was where my mission lived now. The day of Curtis's sentencing began like any other. Cool air, black coffee, the sound of birds building nests outside my window. But inside me, something was shifting. Not the way justice stirs up righteous fire, but the way grief settles after the storm has passed. Curtis received 8 years in federal prison plus restitution and a lifetime ban from working in charitable organizations. His lawyers requested leniency. The judge declined. "You weaponized compassion," she said. "That deserves consequences." I didn't attend the hearing in person. Not because I didn't care, but because I had already witnessed the only verdict that mattered. He lost his honor, and I kept mine. Instead, I spent the day with Maya and a group of veterans at a small shelter just outside town. We were installing solar-powered generators paid for by donations that now came with accountability. Afterward, we shared sandwiches and stories, the kind that aren't fit for movies, but shape entire lives. Later that evening, I received a message. It was from a woman named Lydia. Her father had donated to Curtis's trust before dying of cancer. He had believed in the promise of it. When the truth broke, she said it felt like losing him twice. But now she wrote, "I watched what you did, and I saw how you never looked away." That gave me peace. That gave him peace. I sat with that message for a long time, because there is a difference between healing and forgetting. Forgetting asks nothing, but healing, it demands courage and clarity and the will to carry forward anyway. 1 year after the gala, we held a gathering, not a celebration, but a remembrance. We called it the Night of Honor Reclaimed. There were no tuxedos, no speeches, no cameras. Just rows of folding chairs under string lights, name cards for veterans living and lost, and a wall of handwritten notes that simply read, "You are not forgotten." People cried, hugged, sat in silence, stood in dignity. Near the end of the night, someone passed me a small envelope. Inside was a note scrawled in pen on lined paper. "I was going to end my life last year. I thought no one cared. Then I saw what you did. You made me believe again. Thank you." There was no name, just those words. I didn't try to find out who it was, because sometimes the greatest service is the one no one sees. When I got home that night, I poured a cup of tea and sat beneath the shelf where my medals were tucked away. I hadn't touched them in years. I took down the bronze star, not to polish it, but to place it beside a new plaque. one the veterans had made. It read, "To Marian Holloway. You didn't just wear the uniform, you lived it." And in that moment, I finally let go of what I couldn't save. I couldn't save my son. But I could save what he tried to destroy. And I did. We often think betrayal marks the end of a story. But I've learned it's only the beginning of clarity of truth and of a quieter, deeper kind of strength. My name is Marian Holloway. I'm a mother, a veteran, and a woman who had to choose justice over blood. That choice doesn't come clean. It leaves marks. But those marks, they're the maps we leave for others to find their way through the dark. Curtis's name now sits in the footnotes of a cautionary tale. But the story doesn't belong to him anymore. It belongs to the veterans who stood when no one noticed, to the families who gave when they had nothing left, to every person who whispered "me too" when the lights came back on. And it belongs to you, listening now, not because you crave drama, but because some part of you still believes the truth matters. So here it is, plain and unflinching. You may lose everything: money, reputation, family. But if you hold on to your honor, you've lost nothing that defines you. That's what I tell myself even now as I watch the next generation pick up the torch. They don't need fame. They don't need a microphone. They need an example. And if all I leave behind is this, a story where silence was broken, a name reclaimed, and justice restored not with fists, but with facts, then that will be enough. Thank you for listening to my truth. And if this story moved you, share it. Because someone out there is still in the dark waiting for a light. Let this be that light.